ho ho ho, happy cookie, and no, I already messed up. It's Merry Cookie and a Happy Pocket. There we go.
Yep.
Got it. Nailed it. I am Santa Claus, joined as always by Reformed Scrooge and Unreformed Grinch. I'll let you guess who is who. I'm not sure myself. But anyway, the second of our 3 holiday specials. We're happy to be back and in with the season.
Yeah.
And this time we are discussing an old classic MGM musical starring Judy Garland titled Meet Me in St. Louis, or Meet Me in St. Louis, depending on who you ask and depending which character is pronouncing it in the film.
Yeah.
But this is a pretty old musical with a broad family cast, primarily. Judy Garland being the main character, and she has 4 siblings? 5. 4.
I think 4, because there's the 2 little girls and Rose and
the brother.
Elon?
Elon,
That's his name, is it?
Just Lon, I think.
Lon, yeah. Alonzo. I think that's what that's short for.
I would have been taken so out of it if they were calling him Elon. Yeah. That's way funnier than it should be. And also in the house are the parents, the mom and dad, and I guess a maid that they hire. I forget what her name was, and their grandfather.
Yes.
So a pretty big house, and all of these family members play a sizable enough role to basically form the principals. And then there's this boy next door named John Pruitt that Judy Garland is interested in. And her older sister also has a love interest or two here and there. And the central conflict of this film is Papa is a junior partner at his law firm. Oh boy, I'm beginning to know what that might be like. And yikes. and of course, as the title implies, they live in St. Louis / St. Louis. But lo and behold, Papa gets a notice that he's got to go to New York to do this new job thing, and they're all going to go with him. And the family's freaking out, like, what the heck? You can't do this to us. My whole life is in St. Louis. And basically the crux of the film is whether they go to New York or not. So I guess that's kind of a spoiler warning-ish if you haven't seen it. I think at least... I'm sure we'll talk about whether there's a real dramatic catharsis and what happens and how it happens. But I think the film, in the way it is made and structured, very much hangs its hat on that decision in terms of its plot, for better or for worse. So if you want to preserve that decision, dear viewer, perhaps consider watching the film before listening to the rest of this podcast. But with all that set aside, general thoughts, ratings out of 5. Golly gee, mister, I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say.
Zach can set
Well,
the
sure,
tone.
yeah, that seems a bit of a cue. Yeah, I mentioned this in my Letterboxd review, but I'm not a huge fan of older movie musicals. I often refer to them as, gee golly, mister, musicals, because a lot of them are very, very twee, and everyone is always so happy to be doing everything they're doing. And a lot of the songs are kind of just people bouncing along and they're happy about their day. And I just don't really find it entertaining. It feels kind of, partially because a lot of the time it sort of is, and not necessarily unintentionally, but it does feel quite cheesy, and I don't feel that there's a lot of depth to it a lot of the time. And if I'm not impressed by like the choreography and the songs, it leaves me feeling like there's not really much there for me to latch onto in the film. This movie does have an interesting wrinkle in that it is weirdly mean-spirited, which at least kind of keeps you on your toes as a viewer. But I think it's interesting, Christian, that you said that the main plot of the movie is whether or not they're going to move to New York, because that's the plot for maybe only like a third of the movie. And most of the rest of it, I would say, doesn't really have a consistent story. Sitting here thinking about it, this is kind of similar to something like a A Christmas Story, because that film is very much about just life in this small town and the things that go on. But I think what makes that movie a lot more charming than Meet Me in St. Louis, for me at least, is that that's from like a much younger perspective. And so there's a lot more humor to the way that Ralphie in A Christmas Story like perceives the world and the things that happen to him. Whereas the perspective in Meet Me in St. Louis is that of Judy Garland's character, who's a 17-year-old, and it's also a lot more earnest, and we're meant to take it a lot more seriously. And unfortunately, this is the same reason I didn't like reading Emma in high school. I just don't care. I really don't care if she gets together with John, what's his name, from next door. I'm sorry, but I don't. And that makes it hard to latch onto. I think, while I'm dogpiling on this movie, I think that a lot of the time the Technicolor is kind of garish. That's my opinion on early Technicolor. I find it kind of sickening sometimes. It doesn't look like, oh, it's so lush and colorful. It looks gross. Except for Autumn and Winter. Autumn and Winter look really nice, and like the low light segments look really neat. But when we're in like bright sunlight or bright candlelight, it kind of just looks like a Laffy Taffy wrapper. So yeah, I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5. I understand, I think, what people like about this film and why people like watch it every Christmas, but to me, I kind of came out the other side questioning whether this is really even a Christmas movie, because Christmas does seem pretty incidental to it. There's a section at Christmas, but I really wouldn't call it a Christmas movie. But before I do the whole episode of my own, 2 out of 5. Mitchell, what did you think?
Yeah, better stop with those Laffy Taffy references, Zach. Tired of you and Laffy Taffy. Man, so I guess my biggest issue with musicals in general is when everything kind of feels subservient to the musical numbers, and it doesn't feel like the plot, either the plot is not strong enough or the musical numbers are too aggressive. And I feel like in this, I don't think, like, it felt very realistic, and I really liked most of the musical numbers, but I was going to say it felt really like everything weaved very well into the numbers, and I didn't have any complaints. Nothing felt like shoehorned in or anything. But I will say that it was very difficult to really care as much about the characters when they were talking as opposed to when they were singing. And I guess it sounds like it could be a criticism. I think it probably is. But I mean, I definitely hold it against the film for doing that, because it doesn't really feel much of it like a film. It kind of feels like we're capturing this part of all of their lives as a family rather than following some story. I mean, like, really the only consistent thing at all, like Zach had mentioned, was the New York thing, but that felt so incidental to everything. Like, the only when they start singing and dancing is when everything is very important. And maybe that's intentional, maybe that's kind of just the style of filmmaking, and it's very consistent in that regard. And I do think that a lot of the songs are really good, and I think that Judy Garland is probably one of the main reasons why. I mean, like, she has an insanely good singing voice, and like I was never taken out of it. I was never really bored when the actual numbers were starting. But yeah, the the golly gee Mr. moments and like the MGM stuff, and it just felt very it was so by the numbers, no pun intended, and like it was so formulaic when it came to anything having to do with the story that it was hard for this to go beyond a 3 for me. But I mean, like, I think the cast is really good. Like, all the family members, at least for the most part, are pretty memorable. I think the events that happen around the music are good. I mean, I guess, like, they're pretty memorable. I think the production, I somewhat disagree with the color, because maybe it's just, I mean, I watched it on HBO Max. I don't know if you guys watched it on that too.
I rented it on Prime.
Okay.
I watched a 35 millimeter print that
right.
may or may not have had issues with. I'll get into it when it's my turn. But
okay.
Yeah.
The outdoor
Visual
thing
things.
I can get. I can I can get behind. But yeah, I mean, I really liked the production. I thought all the costumes were awesome. Like, even though there are a lot of hints of the 40s in there, and like the way they talk is pretty on par with the 40s rather than like the early 1900s, but I wasn't really trying to analyze this as a historical, like, period correct drama or something. But at the same time, I think it, like, the costumes and everything deserve credit, and the environments, like all the settings and everything, like their house looks really good. It's very vibrant. So all those things pretty much stuck out to me, and I feel like I'm not going to ask too much of a musical necessarily when it comes to having a lot of depth, and also the time period, and the fact that it's like an early MGM production, but at the same time it's like there has to be something to latch on to, and there has to be like some type of plot driving things forward besides the fact that there's weird macabre moments, and like the kids are like, there's some very interesting things about the kids. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Like, this is an understatement. I mean, the Halloween night thing was probably the most out of left field thing ever.
They literally attempt a mass murder.
Yeah, and then they just laugh it off like a few minutes later. I'm like, I wonder if that was even intentional that they wrote that like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
I thought this was almost more of a Halloween movie than a Christmas movie for, I would probably say 60% of it, honestly. So yeah, but I think the seasonal thing was like a neat creative touch, but overall it's like an alright, like, I liked it. It's an alright musical. I like the songs, and that's probably the most important thing. So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Both of you. I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5, and even though Zach is probably like more vocally critical of this than I'm going to be, I find myself agreeing with pretty much all of what Zach is saying, or at least the gist of it. And I think my rating is more so a reflection of my genre preferences and Zach's genre preferences, rather than a large gap in understanding here. I liked it. I've said this before, but I had not seen this before watching it to record this pod, and I chose it because the Cleveland Cinematheque was showing it in 35 millimeter. So I thought, hey, this would be fun. And I don't know if it was an issue with the print or not, or if it's just, or if I just agree with what Zach said about the Technicolor. But I was kind of bothered for like the first 30 minutes, and then like the last 30 minutes or so. The wintry scenes look better, but and I don't know if it was an issue with the print or something or what, but the first 30 minutes looked like really kind of brown, like in the way that like in elementary school when you're trying to make something look like a historical document and you like dump coffee on it, you know? It kind of had that effect, and I didn't like it. And then at some point when like it switched on a new reel of film, it looked better to me. So I don't know if that was a seasonal change thing. I can't even remember if that was, I don't think it was exactly when they show like 1904 winter or whatever it was. I don't think it was at an exact seasonal swap.
They might have gotten like, I don't know how many reels this movie would be. I don't know a ton about 35 millimeter projection, but it's possible they got the different reels from different prints, and maybe like the first print and the fourth print were a bit older or weren't cared for as well as the ones for the two middle prints. That's guesswork, though. I didn't see the screening that you saw.
Well, that makes sense. I meant to check Max, fire it up on Max just to see by comparison, but I didn't get the chance to, because I've had a heck of a lot of holiday concerts to sing here in Cleveland. And I think we'll get into the is this a Christmas movie question in a bit, but I think I landed on the 3.5 because I really like Judy Garland. I really like the youngest sibling, Tootie, who is insane and terrifying. And interestingly enough, I at least in my experience, except for things like real outliers, like something like Home Alone, you pretty much never see the youngest or a very young child actor kind of leading the billing on this. But Margaret O'Brien is on the posters say like Judy Garland, meet me in St. Louis with Margaret O'Brien. Many of them do. Margaret O'Brien being the youngest actress that plays Tootie, which is very interesting to me. I don't know about this child's career, but just interesting to note. So 3.5 out of 5. Is it a Christmas movie? Is it I don't know. Well, I wanted to ask you guys a little bit more about the plot. I suggested earlier that the crux of it is whether they move or not, but there's also this sort of social pressure for both Esther, Judy's character, and Rose, Judy's older sister, to get married, which is interesting because Esther is either still in high school or just getting out of high school, and I get the sense that Rose is similar, just a bit older. So I wanted to ask you guys. Zach has kind of already answered this with the "I just don't care," but did you care about the romantic subplots? And feel free to branch out into the family members too. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the father as well. So I don't know. There's a smattering of topical options for you to choose from.
I did want to see more of the dad. I thought he kind of had an interesting perspective every time he showed up that was different from everybody else in the family. And I would have liked to see that contrast a little more, because most of the movie he's like at work late and then he comes back very late at night and says something pithy about the fact that his family doesn't appreciate him, and then he goes to bed or takes a bath or something. Comparing this to A Christmas Story again, I think he's remarkably kind of similar in the dynamic to the dad in A Christmas Story, where the dad in A Christmas Story is a total grump who spends most of the time complaining, but then at the very end, he gets Ralphie his BB gun, and it's like the sweetest moment in the entire film, and there's that little glimmer. And I think there's some potential for that kind of thing in this movie, because at the end he sings the song with the mother and she keys it down for him, and it's a very kind of sweet moment. But I don't feel like we've quite seen enough of Dad up until that point for that to have the payoff that I think it's kind of meant to have. In terms of whether I was gripped by the romantic subplots, I think I've already established that I wasn't, but I think kind of part of why I wasn't is that the characters don't really even seem to be all that gripped by them. They are during the scenes that are about the romances, but during any scene where there isn't a boy that these girls like around, they don't really talk about them that much, or they don't seem all that like in turmoil over their decision. So it doesn't really feel like it matters to the extent that when his name isn't Rex, his name's Warren. When Warren barges into their house at the end and says he's going to marry Rose, I think that's meant to feel like I do think that's meant to be like sudden and is meant to be a joke, but I think it's funny to me for a very different reason to why it's meant to be funny, because I think it's meant to be kind of funny and sweet, and the audience is meant to go, "Aw, those crazy kids." But my response was, "I'm sorry, who are you? Why are you in this house?" It plays more like a random moment than it does like a sweet payoff, and I think that's kind of indicative of the fact that the movie maybe doesn't put the priority on the romance that it's trying to.
I mean,
also, Rose does not have jet black hair. I'm sorry to interrupt your intro, Mitchell.
I don't know why
but there is a scene where Judy Garland and Rose talk about, oh, if only Rose was a brunette. Their hair is like exactly the same color. She has a jet black hair. She does not have jet black hair.
It's even weirder because I feel like Garland's hair, you might argue she's close to a redhead, but Rose is like very clearly brunette. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
I'll say that were the romances gonna work out? Yep, they sure were. They sure were. When I first heard about this whole marriage business, you bet your boots they were gonna get married. And that's all I have to say about that. Did I care about them? I mean, I guess. I don't know, Zach. I thought the acting was pretty convincing. I mean, I guess, like I said, my standards are clearly different, all right? When they start singing, I start having a different opinion. All right. So all of a sudden now this is a made up fantasy land. All right, where kids can murder people and spontaneously get married. The same movie, and I think yeah, I like. It was fine. It was acceptable. I wasn't like completely turned off by any of their interactions or anything. I think the production kind of had a lot to do with that for me. I mean, if it looked like really cheap or like they really felt like they weren't, emotionally enveloped in it, then I really wouldn't have cared. And I think if they were just talking, I wouldn't have cared at all. So I mean, as long as the numbers are there, that's what's important to me. And I will say, I don't know, are we going to talk about the Christmas movie thing versus not?
Yeah, but you're not prohibited. You can do it now.
I'm not prohibited. All right.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I'll say really quick. I think there are elements of it that make it a Christmas movie, and I do agree that I agree with the premise that even though it's only like the last 25, 30 minutes of the movie, it can still be a Christmas movie as long as the messaging is there. And I feel like a lot of what was there for the winter time was there to contrast the fall time, like Halloween stuff. And I felt like a lot of that, like contrasting imagery and that tone, and then using like Christmas / the winter as like the means of tying all of the loose ends, and kind of just fulfilling every formulaic stereotype in the story. I think that was the main goal of it, and I guess if it's a Christmas movie, it's also like every other holiday, essentially, is what I'll have to say. It's freaking Father's Day, Halloween, it's everything, okay? Birthday, it's all the holidays, because it's kind of, it's more of a family-oriented movie, and like a somewhat, I guess, coming of age. I feel like coming of age is kind of reserved for like actual literature and not a meme. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
If we are going to discuss is this a Christmas movie point, I think I'll just throw my hat in the ring with, I wish it had ended on the Christmas segment. Because I think there are examples of movies that spend most of their time not at Christmas, but are still Christmas movies. It's a Wonderful Life. Most of that movie does not take place at Christmas, but the whole ending is based around Christmas, and it ends on a high note in front of the Christmas tree with friends and family singing together and celebrating. That's a Christmas movie. If this movie had ended during the winter segment with, "We're not going to New York. Unpack your bags and unwrap your presents," and they're all under the Christmas tree celebrating together, I would go, oh, well, okay, this is definitely a Christmas movie. They wrapped it back around. But they do the Christmas thing, and then they fade to black, and they come back during the summer, and they ride off on carriages to the World's Fair, and it's a fine ending, but it felt a little unnecessary to me, and it kind of felt like after the holly jolly feelings we had after we came out of the autumn where the kids went off to the purge, it felt a little bit like it took away from the seasonal nature of the section, at least.
Yeah. I wouldn't have cared for any of the World's Fair stuff, and the way it happens, I didn't much care for that as the ending either. But I did want to see the World's Fair because they were hyping it up so much the whole time. The kids were like, "We're gonna miss the biggest fair in the world," where St. Louis is like, "It's gonna put us on the map." And then it's like they like kind of walk around a fountain and then like lean over a banister, and that's the World's Fair.
And there's a building with some lights on it.
Yeah,
that they're all very impressed by.
I think. Well, okay. I backtracking to the relationships thing. I think this is where I am most affected by my cynicism, is in the relationship stuff. Not because I don't necessarily care about the romance, or even because I found it unbelievable, but for example, towards the end of the dance, when Esther is with John Pruitt, the guy that she really likes, And this is after she knows that her family's moving to New York. He proposes to her, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's amazing!" And then, like, immediately after they agree upon it, she starts like kind of displaying vague doubts. And he's like, "What are they going to do? They can't stop us. We're of age, or almost." And then you could kind of get hit over the head with a hammer that these kids are like 17, and like in or just coming out of high school. And thinking more removed from that moment now, I can accept it was a different time and maybe that was more common. But hearing him talk about I don't know, like giving up the idea of college to marry her, and I don't know, I my mind immediately jumped to, this sounds like a bad idea and like a poor decision for both of their futures, rather than something that was like romantic and exciting and fulfilling for either of them. So that was what subtracted from that for me.
Yeah, I do think, I don't know, I think the movie is kind of partially relying, and also this kind of takes away from the drama, but it's pretty clear that Esther's family is well off. Like, even if John has to get like a job in a hardware store, she's gonna be fine. But at the same time, that means that I still don't care about their move to Newark, because they're not gonna struggle. There's a point where Rose says, "People like us live in filthy tenements in New York," and I'm like, all right, calm down, lady, you'll be fine.
No, I will partially defend that, just because I'm sure their dad is raking it in as junior partner, but still, like, tending to a house with 5 children and grandpa is that money, you know, when you do the like per capita numbers per person, I mean, and a house like this admittedly grand house that they have in St. Louis, they're not, it is true that they're not going to find, if they're moving to New York City, for example, wherever they live is not going to even remotely compare. So there are like cost of living elements to that statement that to me make it not
gonna
completely
pay the maid
absurd.
15 an hour just to go take a bath. Okay.
Yeah, they're not going to be living in a slum. They're going to be living in like a nice apartment. Like,
yes.
They'll be fine.
Yeah,
like Howard County. Or Montgomery County.
Yeah. And another thing that initially bothered me was kind of all of the stuff with the father. When he first comes home, and he kind of refuses to move the dinner up, and he's just kind of grumpy, I was like, wow, this guy's a real piece of work. I don't like him very much. But as it goes along, eventually I'm like, oh, okay, he's providing for the whole family. I guess that has to count for something. And maybe he does have a point that nobody's telling him what's going on. He's just expected to know that the phone call is a potential proposal. Bookmark that, because I'll get back to him when we talk about the ending later.
Oh, okay.
But Christmas movie. Yeah, I guess it's a stretch to call this a Christmas movie, but I'm going to call it one, mostly for our purposes, because it's, 4 seasons in, there's not a ton of Christmas movies out there that I'm that excited about talking about anymore.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to get to the point where I'm hosting Jingle All the Way too. So even though we had mixed impressions on this, I feel like it's still a good genre mix up. And I think the song, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, probably the most significant and memorable tune in this musical, and that the Christmas phase being when they sort of make their grand decision about New York. I think those two things are what have made it remembered as a Christmas film, even if it's not all through and through. Gosh, what was next? Music. Okay, yes, the music. Did you guys like the music? We have, as I just mentioned, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. We have Meet Me in St. Louis. We have the trolley song. We have the Under the Bamboo Tree, the banger that Tootie sings at the party where they're doing the dance. And in my seat, I was like bopping to that. I was like, hey. And then there's some score that I didn't find super memorable. But anyway, music. What did you guys think?
I think these songs are catchy. I don't necessarily like any of them all that much. I mean, I do like Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. That's a great song. That's a song that I've really liked as a Christmas song before I even knew it was from this film. A great holiday classic CD in our family that has been played every holiday season since I was maybe 10 is Alan Jackson's Let It Be Christmas.
Let's go. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a fantastic album. But he has a great version of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas on there. So that's a song that's been part of the holidays for me for years. The rest of the songs are memorable, but they're kind of like earworm memorable, where they stick in my head, but I kind of find myself annoyed that I'm like humming them. I do think it's interesting, though, that a general hallmark of the Gee Golly Mr. musical is that all of the singing is very kind of theatrical, and you must speak it to the back row, and there's lots of sort of wide gestures, and this film doesn't do that as much. A lot of the singing is... it feels natural, as like the characters sort of just singing with each other. And the first time that they sing Meet Me in St. Louis, like Tootie doesn't know half the words and Grandpa is mumbling most of it. And even though I was kind of neutral on that, I didn't like or dislike that, I did find that interesting, in that it's kind of a step towards sort of the naturalism that later musicals would pursue in like the 70s and 80s. Now, this is no Staying Alive, but it's kind of a step in that kind of more naturalistic direction.
Dance the hoochie coochie with me, Zach.
That was a lyric where I was like, this means something different in 1944.
Yeah. The Yuletides are gay today. Yeah, I mean, it's a good, like, title song. It's probably one of my favorite songs from it, honestly. I mean, I will agree to an extent. I think it is kind of bothersome to have it stuck in my head. It is kind of like an earworm just hearing it 50 times. But as we've talked before, there's, like, theme songs where it's like, you can play it 50 times, but it's acceptable. It's acceptable for this reason. Especially with the way every time it was integrated, it was very original. I think probably like the first few times were very surprising. Like they'd just be playing it on the piano, and then like the dad would come and be like, "Shut that off right now! That's garbage." Yeah, I was like, "Yeah, I agree." And then it would come back and be like, "Man, I missed it. I'm glad it's back now." Skip to My Lou. That was like, I thought the dance number for that one was like surprisingly good. I mean, obviously I've heard that song before. I Was Drunk Last Night, probably the best song in the whole. No, but yeah, I think Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas is the best one. Yeah, I pretty much agree with what Zach said about like the natural integration. I think was probably the reason why, and just repeating the same chorus line. Those two things are the reason why it was so memorable. And I don't really. I would usually have complaints about the way that how like bombastic the numbers are and how like dramatic they are. They just really scale up the entire like room, and it's just like what happened. We're just talking about like what we're gonna have for dinner, and now it's like it's freaking like Beauty and the Beast, like all this time, So, but yeah, I liked the music a lot. It's probably one of my favorite parts of the whole movie, and like I don't really have anything I would take out. I guess I would say the Christmas, just because of like the first Noel little bit and everything. I think all that in the Christmas bit was really well integrated, especially not being really a Christmas movie at all up to that point. So a lot of varied numbers.
Yeah, I agree. I find the title track, shall we say, to be kind of grating, but I enjoy pretty much everything else. I had not listened to any of this beforehand, and I was only very familiar with Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. But I do intend to listen to a bit more of it recreationally, shall we say. I think the Gee Golly Mr. Label for this musical, it didn't occur to me that you would apply it here, Zach, because I think when I hear you invoke that, my mind immediately jumps to like a Sailor musical with Gene Kelly in it, where there's like really over the top dance numbers, and every character is like almost cartoonish in their verve, which there are moments like that here, but I don't think that necessarily applies to the family as a whole, or to the performances constantly, other than scenes where like Judy Garland's really trying to kiss the guy, and you know, they're singing and whatnot. But I was surprised by how good Judy Garland was of a singer. Mitchell already mentioned this in his opening thoughts, but I've seen The Wizard of Oz in elementary school in Miss Z's music class, if Mitchell remembers.
Yep.
Very scary old lady that showed us The Wizard of Oz. And formative moment for all of us, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I intend to rewatch it soon. And that's probably unfortunately for this film, I think my biggest takeaway is wanting to rewatch Wizard of Oz and seek out Garland's other musicals, because I think she's really great. I need you guys to clarify something about the Halloween bit to me. So I was similarly perturbed and shocked by how bizarre that whole sequence was. But so I get that they're like burning furniture and going up to people's doors and throwing flour in their faces, and they're all wearing these like very ugly, totally off the wall costumes. But the mass murder part may have gone over my head. Can you clarify that for me, Zach?
So, okay. The reason that Tootie says that John attacked her is that she and... What is the other daughter's name?
Agnes.
She and the other youngest daughter made like a straw dummy and put it on the trolley tracks because they wanted to see the trolley derail, which could have potentially killed like dozens of people.
Yeah.
And luckily the trolley driver stopped in time. And John, aiding and abetting these young criminals who should be like going to juvie, tried to like put them in the woodshed so the police wouldn't find them, and she put up a fight. And that's why like her lip is bleeding and her tooth is gone, is because she was fighting this guy who was trying to hide her from the police for attempted murder. And everyone just chuckles about it and goes on about their night.
So I didn't realize the gravity of the situation. I thought that they were just vandalizing, or that the trolley was... I can't believe that it didn't... And it's not like I was watching this distracted, mind you. I was in a theater. I didn't like glance at my phone and miss this or something. It was just completely went over my head.
Yeah, Esther was literally like laughing like hysterically about it.
Yeah.
And then Rose is like, they go, what are you laughing about? They could have killed dozens of people. And then they just kind of go on to the next thing. And then they finally, then she just goes and like talks to John and stuff, and then somehow that ends up in their first kiss. So
you know what?
Yeah.
It would have totally turned this movie around for me if the second half of the movie was like a trial determining whether or not Tootie got the chair.
Oh my gosh.
It would be period accurate, or a hanging or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what the Missouri laws are at this point.
And all the idiosyncrasies of the trial, where it's like totally unclear what the judicial process is, and the door is like the height of 10 men, and everything's just wells to the max. Oh my gosh.
The judge is a song.
Yeah. The jury is like a chorus, in the background. Yeah.
Oh man. Legal drama sequel for when Tootie is a teenager, and the question is whether to charge her as a child or as an adult.
She gets like...
Did she know the quality and nature of her actions?
Yeah.
She gets
Meet
5
me in St. Louis
per
too.
victim.
Meet me in St. Louis too. Meet me in juvie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole sequence is crazy. I don't know if there's anything other to say about that besides just how bizarre it is. And we've kind of danced around this a little bit already, but I wanted to ask you guys about the ending, the family's decision to, spoiler alert, stay and not go to New York. Oh my gosh, what? Unbelievable. I thought this was a done deal, Dad. You
Swindler.
goof. Yeah. So did you find that meaningful? And we've already referenced the World's Fair bit in general too, but just like the last 30 minutes of the film, a lot of times an ending can make or break a film. And did this ending make or break this film?
I think Dad's decision is well performed by that actor. And that whole moment to me where he sees like Tootie being led up the stairs, which, by the way, there's an urban legend that Vincent Minnelli got Margaret O'Brien. Is that the actress?
Mm-hmm.
There's a rumor that he got her to cry like that by telling her dog had just died.
Oh my God.
But that whole moment of her being like led up the stairs and she's really upset and she has to be comforted. And he, like, you can see him kind of considering. Throughout that moment, I kind of felt myself feeling like, why don't I, like, feel something right now? And I think it's because it's just, I don't think the conflict has enough time or attention paid to it for me to really be invested in whether or not they move or they don't. Because this is adapted from a book, which I think is... like a summation of the author's like childhood living in St. Louis. So I'm sure within the book, or maybe it's a series of books, I'm not sure, but this is just part of her story of her childhood. And I think they've kind of tried to capture that with the movie of, it's a series of events in childhood. But for that ending to have the gravity I think they wanted to have, I think it kind of needed to be the whole movie. Because I don't feel that I have a strong enough feeling of the kind of effect that it will have on them. Because when Dad is like, well, they'll make friends in school, I kind of find myself agreeing, because when Tootie goes, what friends? My immediate thought was, what friends here? I haven't seen any of your friends over.
Yeah.
I've just seen your sisters.
And in Halloween, all of the kids are shunning her, at least to begin with.
Yeah. So I think it's a solid moment that doesn't really have the work behind it to have the impact that it wants to have.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty cookie cutter. Like, there are so many bad things that would happen. Like, all right, business, mankind is Mr. Smith's business, okay? I think the business was more important. No, I think it's just one of those, like, all right, we'll do this because it's Christmas, the spirit of Christmas, and that just makes everything work out for the marriage and everything for Esther and Roa. They all get to have the perfect marriage, like St. Louis, everybody's meeting in freaking St. Louis. Okay, that's what's important for the story. If they stay there, they all meet in St. Louis, and that's what they did. So... And do I really care? I mean, I was already pretty much set on the fact that it had to have ended in St. Louis, literally just because of the title. I feel like it would have been pretty out of left. Like, we saw children with a bonfire and trying to kill people, but we also, we didn't consider that maybe it wouldn't end in St. Louis. I was assuming they were not going to New York. And also, like, New York's just like the most generic red herring destination for anything ever.
Yep.
So those are the reasons why. Like, maybe if there's a sequel, like nowadays, they'd have a after credit scene where he just leaves the family and goes anyway, and then we have a separate movie with Alonso. So I think that would be pretty interesting. But otherwise, yeah.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus recruits him to S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes, exactly. It works perfectly.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you guys make me laugh. Whew. Well, yeah, I didn't feel much of a catharsis from the ending, which was unfortunate because at the outset, and having read a blurb, when the Cinematheque puts out their schedules, the president of the Cinematheque writes like a few paragraphs of a note to the audience, sort of explaining why this season or discussing something, and it was this note was focused on Meet Me in St. Louis because he chose it as one of his personal favorites, and he cited having grown up in Cleveland and wanting to do something pertaining to film, but not knowing if that meant going to LA or going to New York or staying at home where there were significantly fewer opportunities. And he cited this film as sort of moving to him. I guess in retrospect, I should have known from that they stay in St. Louis since he stayed in Cleveland. But he made a point in the note of not spoiling what the decision was. Mm-hmm. But I think what frustrated me more than anything else is that Judy Garland is, at least in the colloquial sense, the main character. And especially in that scene when she and John are talking about getting married and what that means for them, and the move included, there's almost like this hint of a La La Landish, very, very challenging choice between one's personal future, career-wise, and one's love life, or something to that effect, which I find very compelling. And these questions, these intense emotional dilemmas that don't necessarily have a right answer, but decisions need to be made regardless. I think that's a very dramatically satisfying thing in a way that's just inherent to the human condition, the same way, in the same sense that the hero's journey is engaging to someone, not necessarily because it's familiar and reinforced and retold. Maybe that's part of it, but also because there's something about it that we just inherently attached to. I think the same can be said about these difficult decisions that many of us have to make in our lives. So I felt like that decision wasn't really made by her, and I respect that the dad is like the patriarch, and in that time, I guess it makes sense that he made the decisions, but it just wasn't very meaningful to me because of that. And then the World's Fair is just kind of like a shrug at the end, which is also unfortunate. But all that said, I still found things to enjoy here. Yeah, I think we've mostly picked it apart here. Any closing thoughts before we move on to our other segments?
I'm going to throw back to some OG Zach lore here, because I'm about to talk about ketchup. At the very beginning of this movie, they are making ketchup for a dinner that they're going to have when everybody gets home. And dear listener, when I tell you that this is the most watery looking marinara sauce, and then Grandpa has the audacity to come into the room, taste this ketchup, and say it has to be thinner. It already looks like Kool-Aid. I needless to say, I was very disappointed.
I wanted
this
to
is
try
the clip. This is the clip for all the promos. Is just Zach talking about ketchup.
I tell you what, it just flashes pictures of the ketchup the whole time. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you about. I wonder what that was actually made out of. Do you actually feel like that was like what was that?
I don't know.
What prop marinara do they got backstage?
It looks like it looks like just tomato juice. Now, I'm sure during the early 1900s, ketchup was probably a very different thing. Maybe it was more like just tomato sauce, and I would have been fine with that if not for Grandpa having the audacity to say it had to be thinner. It's already just red water, man. Like, lay off. We don't need any more in there. I'm sorry. I'm passionate about the subject.
Bro is scandalized by this.
Yeah. In theater, and I think it was our freshman year, you made me a theater box once, Christian, where one of the gifts inside was a bottle of ketchup. So I know my stuff. Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
The secret recipe at Heinz. Well, on that note, I really enjoyed this. I was kind of surprised at how incohesive, if that's the word, if it is a word, the story was, and I was also surprised at how many cliches you could burn through between the musical numbers, and what I was genuinely surprised by was the seasonal transitions and the meaninglessness of the World's Fair, which did not look fun. Maybe it was in 1904, but not not for me. I would have wanted to see Lady Liberty. And is that was she been there yet? Oh, I don't know. I think I just put myself in historical.
You're the one that would know this of the three of us.
Whoops. I'm pretty sure it was there. We'll double check. But
that's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. So while I talk and waste as much time as possible as I look up when this was in New York, 1885 was when it was.
Oh, okay. So it was
1886 was when it was actually reassembled. So I was pretty certain it was in the 1800s. So we're good. I'm still winning. Yes. So yeah, I mean, is it a Christmas movie? It's really up to you what you consider. I'm putting that onus on the listener now, so I don't have to be subjected to that question again. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Yuletides are gay, and I think this is a fun time, and it's pretty much what you would expect, considering the time period and Judy Garland's potential.
Right on. Yeah, 3.5 out of 5. I enjoyed it. I'll just say once more that I think 2D is the GOAT, and also just Margaret O'Brien's ability to hold a tune at 7 years old. I know that might sound silly, but like for very young children, it's difficult to even sing a melody for many children that young, let alone doing a full-on duet with Judy Garland and standing your ground and doing. I guess they weren't singing while they were doing the choreography; they were probably lip syncing, but still, a lot going on there. And I can see why she's sort of the co-billing with Judy Garland, and I think why I ultimately decided on liking this more than disliking it is I'm going to make this joke for like surely at least the 12th time. Mitchell and I have both made this joke multiple times before, but because because this is actually Vin Diesel's favorite MGM musical because it's about family.
Yay!
and of all, you guys are gonna grill me for this so hard, and I deserve it. But like 5-10 minutes in, I was like, this is just like Shazam because they're like a big family and they're happy. Yeah.
It kind of is like that's kind of crazy, actually.
I wish you guys could see Zach's face right now.
You got me making my skeptical De Niro face right now.
Things do come around, Zach, and there is potential for a sequel. Give them all powers. That's it.
Okay, that was like the broadest possible stroke comparison I could have possibly. That was like that was more of a reach than most of mine. This is like Star Wars because blah blah blah. No, but I like the family and I like the way they interact with each other. Mm-hmm. And I think when they're all like sitting around the dinner table, even when they're not happy, there are moments that kind of feel genuinely familial. And I think that unit is kind of what makes enough of the film work for it to be a good film to me. And no film is absent of the time and circumstances in which you see it, and that's always going to factor into your rating. So I totally respect somebody that calls this a personal favorite or it's meaningful to them. I don't think it's something terrible that doesn't belong on that pedestal. I think there's enough to love here. And also just super quickly cycling back to my 35mm thing, I've seen now like at least half a dozen 35mm showings at the Cinematheque. It's a cool novelty, and they often look good. But in my opinion, 4K DCP is the way to go these days. I'm sorry, I just think it's better and it's easier for everyone. And if you have a good projector, it looks better. And yeah, it's a neat novelty, and I'll still say it like it's a cool thing when I go see one.
Yeah, I'm seeing the 35mm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But in general, I think George Lucas was right about the digital revolution for filmmaking. So now that we've got our George mention in, checking that box, that quota, let's review our weeks in review.
Okay.
Go
well,
first.
I guess I'll mention another seasonal thing that I did yesterday. I did that last time we recorded one of these, something I'd done the day before. And yesterday, my family and my girlfriend and I went to see the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra accompany Cirque du Soleil's The Nutcracker.
Ooh.
Wow.
which was a lot of fun. It was kind of unusual because Cirque du Soleil is very acrobatic by its nature, and they kind of need a lot of vertical and horizontal space in a lot of their performances. But the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra takes up most of their own stage, so Cirque du Soleil has to kind of perform within kind of a narrower space than they normally would. But I've never seen Cirque du Soleil perform before in person, so I wasn't kind of feeling that limitation. And I think they pulled off a lot given how limited the setting was. It's the same kind of very simple Nutcracker narrative that you've seen anywhere from 1 to 100 times before. The Nutcracker seems to really wildly vary with people in terms of how much of a holiday tradition it actually is. I had a lot of fun with it. The Baltimore Symphony Orchestra were flawless. A lot of the time when I see live music, I have this little thought at the back of my head where I'm like, what if somebody messes up? Somebody is very capable of messing up right now and throwing everything off time. And I did not have that feeling watching this at all. I was totally into it and totally into the world of just kind of the acrobatics and the dancing. And the music sort of flowed right into the background, that it was as if I was listening to a recording. It was very immersive, and I wasn't distracted in any way by the fact in the way I normally am when I watch live musicians perform. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think, if anything, I think the second half of the Nutcracker is not as fun as the first half, because the first half is kind of where all the plot is, and then the second half is just everybody's celebrating the fall of the Rat King, which just means that there's this kind of dance, and then there's this kind of dance, and then there's this kind of dance, and they feature interesting stunts. There was a bit where a woman did like a handstand and bent over and poured a cup of tea with her foot. That was very impressive. But it doesn't have as much kind of forward momentum and a sense of a story as the first half does. But still, I would absolutely recommend it if they're still performing after this episode comes out, which will be on the 24th of December. I recommend that you and yours go to see the production as well.
So when are we seeing the Cirque du Soleil Twitter review, Zach?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not gonna. I don't feel capable of reviewing that experience on Twitter.
But you do feel capable about music. I'll see myself
okay.
out, Zach.
Here's the thing: an album is like in and of itself like a completed entity that I have like set feelings on, and I either enjoyed it or I didn't. I feel like this kind of Cirque du Soleil orchestral combined performance, it's in such kind of a nebulous multi-medium zone that I'm not really sure how I would even like evaluate it. Am I evaluating the acrobats, or am I evaluating the musicians, or am I evaluating the time I had in the venue? It was just fun, and I recommend it as fun to other people.
So it's like Remy in Ratatouille when he eats the food and he's like seeing the colors in his head. Is that what it's like? He can't review it. It's
that's a fine comparison.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
I have
right.
to plug, Zach, before you go, Mitchell. You got to come see the Cleveland Orchestra if you were impressed by the Baltimore Symphony, because Cleveland Orchestra, New York Times has called it the best orchestra in the country. So,
Wow.
Okay.
just saying.
All right, I'll
We'll
keep
see
it in
if I
mind.
trust the Times about that. Well, might as well leave the world behind after that interesting episode, huh? Leave the world behind on Netflix. I saw secondhand. I saw a TikTok talking about why this movie.
Mitchell
is
saw a TikTok?
Actually, yeah. Believe it or not, I actually look at my Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts once in a while.
Yeah, I do too. It's bad, right?
Yeah, only partially influenced by the CCP. So I'll say for Leave the World Behind, it is not Illuminati propaganda. However, it's not well written enough to be that, actually. I'm sorry, Obama. It's not that good. Okay. Please don't send Secret Service after me. So I guess it has so much potential, and I really enjoyed the ideas. I think Ismail is somebody who really really had a lot of things written down that he wanted to make a film about, and a lot of different ways of executing it. But he decided at one point or another to just full send and just go with every single idea all in one go, and he never really felt like it was necessary to have a linear closeout or like have every end tied off, because I can tell you right now, every idea when it comes to like a modern apocalypse that you could ever think of is in this, and there is no explanation as to whether any of them is actually real or not, like if which one is actually happening. It's not even just the fact like, oh, there's a disease, who caused the disease, like The Walking Dead or any number of movies that are like that, or like, oh, it's aliens, where are the aliens from? It's even more generic and like general than that. It's like, maybe it's Iran, maybe it's Korea, maybe it's all of them, maybe it's none of them, maybe it's two kids in the Philippines. That's all of these things are offered as potential things. Maybe it is aliens, maybe it's the US government, maybe it's no one, maybe it's just happening on its own. All of these are offered as things, and none of these things are ever actually explained, okay? These are very minor spoilers because I'm just telling you right now that there's no explanation to anything. I think most of the movie substance really comes from the experience of waiting for the great like ending to happen. Almost like, I don't know, like any other Doomsday movie, what makes a really good Doomsday movie is the impending doom itself, like the actual process of understanding what's going on. That is great. It's not satisfactory at all. It doesn't make you feel good at all at the end, I can tell you right now. But what it does do great is presenting all these different ideas finally. Like a lot of the cyber attack stuff has never really been hit head on before. Especially like in an apocalypse movie, or like going as far as like this is how bad it could actually be, except I guess Mission Impossible, but like we didn't get a part 2 to that yet, so I guess you can't really say how far it really went. But like this is like supposed to be going through realistic scenarios, and like you can't trust anybody, all the characters are lying to each other. I would say that what is it, I keep forgetting his first name, but God, Ali, whatever his first name is.
Mahershala?
Mahershala Ali is by far the best actor in this. Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke are like kind of sort of the main-ish characters in like the first half maybe. And then there's also like the couple kids, but like the writing's just carrying the fact that there's the next Doomsday thing that's going to happen. Like that's like, we have to figure out like there's another incident of something that's evidence for one of the Doomsday things happening, like a flyer coming down from a drone or something, or like planes falling from the sky or something like that is happening. And then that is all the explanation, or like the animals are acting really weird, or there's like a microwave weapon or something, or there's some random crap is happening. And like there's like I am like anticipating like what's going to happen. Are we ever going to find out who the enemy is? You know, that's kind of like the main point of the plot. So it's very disappointing when none of that comes to fruition. And it's kind of just a meme ending. It's just like, it just ends and it ends and that's it. And like, it's very disappointing, but at the same time, it does present a lot of potential in that department. And I will give credit that there's a lot of newer ideas here that have never really been hit head on before by a director, when it comes to like a Doomsday related movie or something where it's like, I guess the last thing we ever really talked about in the podcast was 10 Cloverfield Lane. It's kind of similar to that. Like, even though it's very isolated, you know, it's just, it's hard to go about these films without being unoriginal. So I praise the original ideas here, but I think the execution definitely needed some work.
I know you've said nothing in the movie is really like explained. Can you explain at least the circumstance of the self-driving car thing? Because Twitter has been awash with
oh yeah,
that
that's
scene.
a whole other thing. Yeah.
Is there like a point? Is that like a big part of the plot, or does it just happen in that scene and then it's over?
It happens in that scene and it's over. I mean, I think they might reference it again, but otherwise it's like once again, it's like just another, like, would it be cool if like Teslas went crazy, you know, and then Teslas went crazy, on to the next crazy thing that happens, and that's it.
Okay. Huh.
So.
Seeing that clip, I was like, oh, is it like the car or something, where like the cars went mad? But I guess not.
Nope.
All right, Christian, you can come back. Christian has
okay.
unplugged and is doing a little dance while we discuss the plot in very minor detail.
Only because my parents are wanting to watch this with me, though.
Okay.
I don't have very
see.
high hopes with it anymore, especially after Mitchell's review. I like Mahershala and Ethan Hawke, but yeah, it sounds like. I don't want to project too much here, but it kind of sounds like Quiet Place Syndrome, where you kind of have like the inkling of a smartish idea, but then the execution is just very difficult to totally land.
Yeah.
Anyway, I saw on the same day that I saw Meet Me in St. Louis, I had a concert in the afternoon, which ended very shortly before the screening for Meet Me in St. Louis. So I blitzed down to the Cinematheque, and then I just stayed there for the rest of the night. Because they were showing 2 more films, and I was like, what the heck? It's the last night I'll have here for the next 4 weeks or so. And you know what? I'm going to see the movies. And the second of these 3 films was Fallen Leaves, which is a Finnish film that's getting a lot of hype. It's been on quite a few top 10 best lists for the year. And Time Magazine called it the film of the year. So... you know, that's something, I guess. And it's I think I don't know if I just mentioned it's a Finnish film. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing this director's name, Aki Kaurismäki. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the actors because it's just not going to happen. But the theater was packed. It was like the most full I'd ever seen the Cinematheque. And I think it's just all the cinemaphiles, good Lord, all of the cinephiles in Ohio, or at least Northeast Ohio, reading about the hype this movie is getting in indie publications and seeking it out on their own. But it was really cool to see the theater really fill up for this. It was very neat. It's only 81 minutes long, and it's like this super deadpan romantic comedy, dramedy kind of thing. Very comparable to a Jim Jarmusch kind of thing. But so deadpan-y to the point that I don't think it had the personality that a Jarmusch film has. Though the leads are fun, and there's one supporting character who's like the best friend and roommate of the guy, and there are a lot of jokes that he makes at his own expense, and there's a scene where they go to a karaoke bar and he sings, and it's very funny. And so that was fun. And then there's a scene, the sort of like the first date that the 2 main characters go on. They go to the cinema. And what do they see? What movie do they see at the cinema? What do you think, Zach? You want to guess what movie they saw at the cinema?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, what would I'm going to guess they see Sallow or the 120 Days of Sodom.
There are worse guesses to make. I'll give you that. They saw The Dead Don't Die. It like cut straight into the scene where Adam Driver and Bill Murray are like hacking and shooting the zombies and they're swarming them. And I was like, yeah, this is the best thing ever. Oh my God. And then I realized that this was the cinephile version of fan service baiting, where you dangle the Dead Don't Die footage in front of the Jarmusch nerds and get them to jump up in their seats, just like the Daredevil cameo in Spider-Man or whatever. And but I totally fell for it in the moment. I'll give him that. But yeah, I think there are a couple pivotal moments that happen off screen that aren't super convincing. This is kind of a spoiler here, but there's a scene where he's gonna go meet her for a follow-up date, and he like walks out of his apartment building, and he kind of walks like 10 to 12 feet off screen to the left, and then there's just like a loud noise of a train coming, and then you're just meant to believe that it hits him, but you don't actually see it. He just walks out of frame, and then there's like train noises, and that was just kind of bizarre. Anyway, I gave it a 3. It has its moments. I think calling it could be your film of the year, and that's okay. But I don't know if it's the film of the year. I don't think there's a single thing it does better than, say, Oppenheimer. But you know, I don't mean to sound like a grump. There's vision here, and it's well photographed, and the actors are charming. It's just very understated and not spectacular. But I gave it a 3 because I liked it, and it was a neat experience. So
That bit with the train, is that played for comedy or tragedy?
nobody laughed. I don't think it was played for comedy.
The reason I ask is, I mean, if they're using like The Dead Don't Die in like a referencey way, clearly it is like a cinephile targeted film. And there is a very well-known moment in the Ed Wood film Plan 9 from Outer Space at the beginning of the movie where Bela Lugosi, in like an awkward wide shot, walks out of his house and smells a flower and then walks off screen like 10 or 12 feet, and you hear a car like it brakes and and then like the thunk of it hitting him.
It was definitely that, but it totally, now that you're saying it, I'm sure that's what the director was going for, but it did not land at all.
Yeah.
And this is like a theater full of people that are the
Would get
most
that
likely to, So
Yeah.
it just didn't really work in context, but yeah. Okay, well, in the sort of pre-game chatter I had with Zach when the call was loading, I said this wouldn't be a 75-minute episode, but here we are, and I'm still going to do the rundown.
You lost
so
the bet.
I guess it will be. Yeah, I should have taken the over, but you all know what the rundown is by this point, except maybe you didn't know that I'm back in the writer's chair, so it's getting real again. We're back to our roots, and Zach is the victim. Just how we like it around these parts.
Zach's getting run down by a trolley, runaway trolley,
Yeah.
something.
Oh my gosh.
A
Okay,
rogue
Mitchell,
carriage.
you're gonna start us off because
All
I
right.
freaking said so.
Sheesh.
1 minute. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, go.
Fancy schmancy title cards.
3 out of 5.
St. Louis.
2 out of 5.
Saint Louis.
3 out of 5.
Dancing the Hoochie Coochie.
2 out of 5.
Being one's Tootsie Wootsie.
2 out of 5.
Demented 1903 Halloween traditions.
2 out of 5.
Eating early on a hot day.
2 out of 5.
The World's Fair.
3 out of 5.
Proposing over an invention.
3 out of 5.
Career change. Baltimore Orioles first baseman.
3 out of 5.
Papa hating musicals.
4 out of 5.
Skipping college to marry immediately out of high school.
2 out of 5.
Friend zoning Judy Garland.
2 out of 5.
Taking your grandpa as your date to the dance.
2 out of 5.
Tootsie PTSD.
2 out of 5.
Taking your brother as your date to the dance.
2 out of 5.
Zach Garrigus as Alonzo Smith.
3 out of 5.
Rate the ketchup.
4 out of 5.
I bit him.
2 out of 5.
Too much cake. Oh, time.
Wow. You didn't hear that last one. Tis the nature of the
It's like I was
rundown.
scrolling between the list and the timer, and I was it's like, oh. Oh my gosh. That was
Nice.
fun. Zach, you're hosting our next one, is that right?
Our
I
next
am,
and final
yes.
holiday
And
special.
it's a good thing that we started our discussion on we're already to is this or is this not a Christmas film territory, because usually I'm the one who intros the film that starts that discussion. But yeah, last time we did one of these holiday specials, I brought in The Signalman, which was an episode of the BBC series A Ghost Story for Christmas, and I think it went over pretty well. It was a different pick. It was a little shorter than our usual kind of thing, which I think added some variety. And I thought, well, all right, let's try it again. So next time we will be talking about Whistle and I'll Come to You, which is not an episode of A Ghost Story for Christmas, but it is the like short ghost story on Christmas Eve broadcast by the BBC that made them think maybe we should do ghost stories every Christmas in like a show. It's from the early 60s. It's about 45 minutes long. And it should be a bit of a shake-up of pace, but I like talking about a spooky story around the holidays, so that's what we will be talking about next time.
Right on. Does this one have Denholm Elliott too?
No, it does not.
Does it have anything in common with Doctor Who?
Not that I know of. I don't
find
think
out.
any of these actors were in Doctor Who.
We'll find out.
Really?
We'll see.
Interesting.
I don't think so. Some of the crew might have been. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, on that note, I look forward to hearing about the the assistant grip that was on Doctor Who season 2 or whatever.
That may be, yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
All
this
right.
has been the Merry Cookie and Happy Pocket. We'll see you again real soon. Good night.
Happy hunting.
Bon voyage.